Hey everybody, Tony D with another hot take, and I've spent the entire day in my pajamas playing Terraforming Mars with my some of my family members. I haven't showered, but I did still read the news in between games. Um, there's a lot of woke stuff, but some hope is on the horizon. So let's get into it. Smash like and subscribe. Please check out my books. Link it in the description. And of course, BitChute and Rumble are other places to go. Little Joan is asleep on the couch. She's had quite enough of me today. She had a big day running around like a dog. So, popular leftist blog takes aim at Dolly Parton because, quote, the idea of whiteness underlies her image. Dolly Parton, look, I hate country music. There's almost no country music I'll listen to, and certainly not really any Dolly Parton. Maybe 9 to 5, but that's about it. But she's so nice. She's such a nice lady. And to attack her like this, I mean, it just shows you they're running out of people to attack. Now I'm sure there's plenty of nasty people to attack that probably don't deserve this particular kind of woke criticism, but at least you would say, well, who cares? That's a a-hole. But Dolly Parton's so nice. She gives to charity. She's a friendly person. She seems very, very nice. I've never heard anyone badmouth Dolly Parton or say that she was a bad person or, one of her assistants or anything like that. It's just terrible. But it comes from Vox, right? The left-wing blog Vox. These guys, in my view, they complain about everything. And it's just, Dolly Parton, she's just nice. I take personal umbrage. Even though I don't know Dolly Parton, I don't listen to her music, but every time I've seen her, she's always been very nice on TV. So, stop. Just stop. When are you going to stop, Vox? When are you going to actually report something and be nice about it? Other woke crap. Boston suspends some advanced level classes, cites racial inequality as the reason. This is dumb, it's stupid, and we're going to see more of it, unfortunately, over the next 4 years of the Biden administration. Officials from Boston Public Schools have just announced on Saturday that advanced classes will be suspended for students from the 4th through 6th grades due to, quote, racial inequalities. This is from the Post-Millennium. More than 70% of the students enrolled in advanced classes were white and Asian. 80% of the students at Boston Public Schools are black and Hispanic. You have to either have the grades or specifically sign up for these classes. That's the only qualifiers. No one's sitting around trying to keep the black and Hispanic kids out of these classes. No one. No one's doing that, especially not in woke Boston public schools. The fact that they had a meltdown over this will tell you that. But I guess they're a bunch of racists. Why don't you just fire them all? But that's not going to happen. This is just not acceptable, school committee member Lorna Riviera said. I've never heard these statistics before, and I'm very disturbed by them. Oh, Karen, oh no. The program is open to all students in Boston public school systems. Admittance was based on high test scores and then a lottery because of limited spots in the program. Sounds fair. I guess some kids just do better in school. Okay, let's say for a moment there's some racial component to this. The only two explanations, or either there's racist in your school doing it on purpose, or you have to think like a racist and decide that certain races are doing better. That's the only two options. I would say it's just, I mean, the third option, which is the most likely option, is it's just the way the kids were raised. They were raised to work hard and do schoolwork, and maybe the other kids weren't. Maybe. And that's not racial, it's just cultural. So you have to change the culture of those students' families. But you're not going to do that. It would be nearly impossible anyway. And you'd probably just end up angering all those students' parents. Because if they're from homes in which they don't have a lot of money, or maybe there's not a lot of quiet places to study, there's too many kids, or I don't know, there's not a happy home life. You can't solve the problems of everybody. But just saying that this is about race is glossing over the complex nuances of each individual student's issues. So you can force a few students into the program based on their race, but that's inevitably going to lead to some students being forced out of it by race if there's limited slots. What does that solve? Nothing. All you end up doing is putting kids in classes that maybe they're not ready for or can't compete. Then you're gonna have to rig the system so they don't look bad, I guess. And then the students who you send back into the regular classes are gonna get straight A's all the way through and make those kids look bad. You were heading for that the short story. I think it's by Vonnegut, about the guy who was good at everything. So, but the society in the story put on all these various gadgets to make him equal to everybody else. He was strong, so they made him wear weights. He had great hearing, so they made him wear headphones. He had great vision, so they made him wear these goggles that blurred his vision. He was smart, so the headphones put this buzzing noise in his ear, and all these things that would make him even with people who were not as talented, fast, strong, etc. That's what we're headed for. That's essentially what this school is doing. They're putting blinders on some people to make the people who are not as quick or whatever be even. And it'll never work. They just end up pissing people off and making students disillusioned. Quite frankly, the whole public school system's a wreck. I would privatize it all. I would start to sell off all the schools to private businesses at a rate that would make sense, and transition all the kids into a private system which would be competitive, and you could regulate it. Now, you wouldn't want to over-regulate it. You wouldn't want to run it, but you would want to regulate it. And you would want to facilitate any lawsuits against these organizations to make sure they were doing their job. But if they weren't, and your kid didn't get a good education, you could sue the school. And guess what? If you sued the school and it was a private institution, it would be a private institution that would lose the money, not the taxpayer. And rather than having these teachers in the union fight the local governments for their money, they could argue with a corporation that would be much more likely to pay them something. And they would probably all get pay raises anyway. It's just that a corporation would run the school district differently. First off, they would never do this racial inequality nonsense, I don't think. Well, looking at some of the corporations now, like Coke or whatever, maybe, but even if they did do that, they would do it more efficiently. They would just say, change this, because that's the way corporations work. They send out a memo, if they're not obscenely huge, they change things around. They spend money on things. Every school I know teachers. I dated a teacher for a while. The school was broke. She was selling off old vintage equipment the school didn't need on eBay in order to raise money so she could then buy paper and pencils for the class. That's how broke the school was. This was not a poor inner city school. This was a suburban New Jersey school. The school had been scammed. The school board hired a consultant who promptly stole $800,000 from the school district, but rather than sue him and press charges, the school board decided it would be cheaper just to let him have the money. That it would cost them more trying to get the money back than it would just letting him, sweeping it under the rug. So that's what they did, and that's why they were broke. And that's your local school board, if you let it get that way. But can you imagine a company like, I don't know, McDonald's losing $800,000? No way. They would send a team of lawyers and they'd get every dime back. Same thing with Disney or Walmart, any big company. And you might say, well, I don't want a corporation teaching my students. What do you got teaching them now? The government. And how good of a job do they do? Well, not great. On top of the fact they're going to be teaching critical race theory in some of these schools. So I say take a chance with McDonald's and Walmart. They can't do any worse. This is also very sad. I'm starting with the bad news, but I do have some good news. This is in Louisiana. A cop was killed. He was doing security at a basketball game, and there was a guy who didn't have his mask on. So he, told him he couldn't come in. He escorted him out. Guy pulled out a gun and killed him, if you can imagine, over a mask. The masks have to go. No one forces anybody to go anywhere in this country. You're not forced to go to a restaurant or a bar, or for that matter, a high school basketball game. It's just this lockdown makes people nuts. It's driving people crazy. Even I'm a homebody. I just spent all my Saturdays sitting in front of this computer playing games. It doesn't bother me to be cooped up in the house. I like being cooped up, but most people like to go places and do things. You got to let them do things. I mean, every day the Biden administration, it makes me understand a little more why they haven't taken down the wall around the Capitol and sent the troops home. And speaking of Biden, who's the boss? Dr. Jill jumps in to answer question as Joe Biden asked about warehousing migrant kids in tents, says Biden's children's camps are, quote, more humane. Oh. So this reporter, cutie, from Univision, all the Univision female reporters are beautiful, had this question, and Joe Biden answered, right now there are thousands, let me do it as Joe Biden. Come on, man. Right now there are thousands of unaccompanied children across the border. In Texas, they opened up one that was former one used in the administration, the last administration. Our hope and expectation is that won't stay open very long, that we'll be able to provide for every kid who comes across the border safely to be housed in a facility that is licensed. It sounds confusing. I mean, it's kind of confusing, right? So Dr. Jill jumps in, and this administration is doing it in a humane way. And that's really important. I mean, we want to make sure these children are safe and they get mental health services. They get physical health services. They get education. Oh, great. Nice job, Mommy. First off, just because you say it doesn't mean it's true. Second off, we've all seen the report about them changing the signs up outside these facilities. They can't let them wander off, so they're trapped there. They're kids. They're foreign kids. They may not even, they don't speak the language typically, but you can't let them leave. They'd wander into the country or wander back into the desert or whatever. They're kids. They could get hurt if they're unaccompanied. I mean, it's such hypocrisy. Trump was doing the same thing. Do you think Trump was really putting children in cages? No. This is the Biden administration. They're doing the same damn thing. They're locking up the kids. They're not hurting them. They're trying to find out who their parents are. And, there's so much corruption along the border. These coyotes, they've got dozens of people. Some of them are probably in the Border Patrol too. And, these kids are used as shields for people to get into the country. And Biden's trying to go back to that. So this is the scam. I mean, you send a couple across the border with a kid, and they pretend to be a family if they're not. Now, sometimes it's an actual family, but sometimes they're just pretending to be a family. You'd feel sorry for them, right? If you were driving down the road and you saw this family of three, like, oh, we just came across the border to work. We're so poor. Like, you wouldn't, I think you'd know how you'd react. You'd be like, well, geez, can I give you a ride? You probably shouldn't give them a ride. I wouldn't advise that, simply because, you don't know their real family. They could still be, criminals, but, you would have that feeling at least. Also, you'd be in a lot of trouble if they were illegal aliens. You could get in a whole lot of trouble. But maybe not now under the Biden administration. But, the question is, why is Jill answering this question? It's because her husband is kind of old. Let's see if we can see some of it here. I'm going to put the sound off. Here she is asking the question. Okay, so there's Joe, and he's answering it. He looks like he's hanging in there. It sounded like he hesitated a bunch of times. Oh, I guess he's not woke enough to speak Spanish. Answer the question in Spanish. Well, let's see. Let's cut to the chase here. Come on. Yeah. She's just throwing in her 2 cents. It looks like here from the transcript, she kind of clarified and called the licensed facilities, whatever that means, shelters. Part of this is the whole linguistic propaganda, as Sticks and Hammer calls it. You want to call it the right name, but the buzzword here that, the soundbite here that Gateway Pundit is that, oh no, these camps are more humane. As if the Trump administration was torturing people. Here's a weird story too. This is Jen Psaki. They want to charge reporters $170 every time they go into a briefing now. Are we that broke? Is the country that broke? Daily Caller notes that White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki vowed hours after Biden inauguration to bring truth and transparency back into the briefing room. I guess it's super expensive. The mainstream media goons who shrieked and moaned about free press during the Trump administration are pretty much mum after the Biden admin announced they would be charging reporters for their beer virus test every time they entered a building. Oh my God. Without taking the $170 test, reporters will not be allowed to enter the building. Oh, okay. So that's a little misleading, Gateway Pundit, but still, that's a lot of money. Most of the places that, go to the press briefing now, they're all going to be mainstream outlets, so you can certainly afford $170. And either way, it's a total tax write-off if anybody had to pay it. So, big deal, but still. 170. I guess that's right, because that's immediate results. That's what I took one of those tests. It was a little less, but here, some good news. We're getting to the good news now. Wikipedia's founder is creating a new free speech competitor to the website, citing leftist domination. Good. This is Larry Sanger, who co-founded Wikipedia in 2001 before leaving the project. Encyclosphere as a network is going to be a network aggregation of existing and new encyclopedia content. It will be distinguished from the colorful and unverified content slung onto Wikipedia by the site's user base. Sanger envisions millions of people writing and submitting encyclopedia entries. Well, that's going to be dominated by leftists too. Unless you're going to police it, unless you're going to stop people. I mean, it can be rated and judged. The entries can be rated and judged for accuracy by their readers themselves, rather than the arrogant and controlling oligarchy that is running Wikipedia, Sanger maintains. Interesting. I don't know. I don't know. I think they'll just take it over. I mean, they took over Reddit. They took over Wikipedia. What you have to understand about these people, they have nothing to do. Most of them are trapped at home. They were out of work. I mean, in New Jersey, the restaurants are all closed. All those waitresses, a lot of them were wannabe actors, and that's like a wait staff job. And I'm not knocking waiters and waitresses. I like them. I want to go back to restaurants, but it's not like a permanent job for a lot of people. You work in a lot of different areas. Same thing with cooks. They jump from restaurant to restaurant, sometimes job to job. It's a different group of people. A lot of people don't have a career doing that unless they move up in the management. They're on to something else. You're wait staff for a while, and then you're on to something else. So I think there are just a lot of people who are out of work, who are just, and they want free money. They're being conditioned to warm up to the idea. So I totally admire this guy's view. I hope it works. I'm not very optimistic that it will. Appeals court strikes down city's gun storage requirement. This is in Washington State, which is good news for the Washingtonians. And they have Seattle there. It's ruled that a safe storage requirement for gun owners imposed by the city of Edmonds cannot stand, because such rules are controlled by the state. Well, hopefully the state won't just say, oh, okay, yeah, we love that rule. Here is South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, gorgeous. She was at CPAC, and she said, beer virus didn't crush the economy, government did. Noem 2024, I say. She's got a good attitude, and she kept her state open. South Dakota's been open for longer than Florida. They were so happy with her job during the beer virus, they threw her a parade. I've never heard of any governor being thrown a parade. You certainly wouldn't see a parade thrown for Phil Murphy, unless he was at the head of a BLM parade, probably. Virtue signaling. Well, that's it. This was just an article I was reading. 50 richest women in the world. I'll just tell you number one. It's I can't even pronounce her name. Francosis Bentoncourt Myers, who's worth roughly $71 billion. She is the heir to the L'Oreal fortune, the makeup company. Oh, here it is. This is at CPAC. The conservative faithful doubled down on Trumpism. After a resounding embrace of ex-president, leaders to define where movement goes next as it resists Biden agenda. So this is good news. Now, this is from Just the News. um, which isn't particularly biased, but a little right leaning, I would say. Um, but this is big news. Um, it looks like the majority of Republicans still are on board with Trump, despite everything that's been thrown at him. Yes, there are still a bunch of rhinos out there gumming up the works. Those guys are going to get booted from office or they're going to fall in line. But it's going to be a tough fight. No one said this is going to be easy. So, but this is great news. These guys are finally coming around. They're going to fight. Because if we can finally get these Republicans to fight for what they believe in, and now that what they believe in is populism, jobs for the working man, keeping America in America, not trying to spread it across the globe. I mean, it's a big transformation for the GOP to be anti-war. And they're not pacifists. That doesn't mean you're a pacifist if you're anti-war, but you see, you don't go to war unless you absolutely have to. And that's kind of what Trump tried to do. I don't know if he was totally successful. He did a few things I don't agree with, but he kept the war machine in check. He used it as sparingly as he could. I'd give him like a B plus in that area, but that's head and shoulders above all the previous presidents. I mean, Obama, Bush, they were total failures at that. Bill Clinton, I'd give him a passing grade. I mean, I feel like he wouldn't have bombed Kosovo if he didn't get into a scandal. For him, though, being backed into a corner with that scandal was like, well, I'm going to have to bomb somebody now. Which, no, I don't agree with, but I'd give him like a barely passing grade because most of his presidency was relatively quiet. Same thing with Reagan. Like, Reagan got up to some stuff, but, he didn't get us into a full-blown war. Bush and Obama, man, they let the bombs fly. They just don't seem to care. Same thing with Biden. He's going right back to it. He's going right back to Syria, right back to, America's back. Yeah, America's back and bombing countries again, thanks to Biden. Anyone on the left who voted for Biden who's surprised by this needs a serious wake-up call. Oh, I'm so tired. Sorry. I spent too much time playing games today. But the Republican Party isn't playing games anymore, hopefully. Finally. These guys are going to stand up on principle. And it's weird for me to say that because I was a Democrat for so long and I always thought the Republicans were a bunch of unprincipled idiots. And a lot of them were. But the thing is, their ideology does have limits. They have some principles and traditions. The Democrats have abandoned all of them. There's nothing left. What is there left in the Democratic Party in terms of tradition or limits or rules? They've been so hypocritical, beyond anything I've ever seen with the Republicans. The Republicans would be warmongering, but at least when they warmongered, there was a reasoning behind it, even if it was a lame and stupid one. When they did things, culturally, there was principles behind that. Ones I didn't agree with, but at least they were there. I mean, we talked about this in Wokistan, a novel. We have a character in it named Professor P, and he's gay, and but he's older, and he remembers the days when gay people weren't accepted, and he gets so frustrated at the leftists. He says, I'd rather have the Christian coalition types back in power because at least those people had some amount of principles. I didn't agree with them, but at least they had them. The leftists have nothing anymore. They've destroyed everything. So this is the only train in the station. This isn't like an endorsement of, hey, I love Republicans. It's there's no other choice now. You know, the libertarians, I love them, but they're a mess. And they basically sold us out this last election with the last candidate, which isn't surprising. I mean, the party itself is a mess. But the Republicans have embraced populism, and that's what the Democrats used to do. That's why it's taken them so long to destroy their credibility. They were the populists for many, many years. In the days of FDR, they were popular. They were populist. They were doing things differently. Now it's the Republicans' turn. So hopefully they're not going to let it go to their heads when they win. And I think they eventually will.